In this video, we are in central Arizona on historic Highway 80 to visit the site where Hollywood's first Western star lost his life in a fatal car accident. Right now, we're a few miles south of Florence, Arizona. Highway 79 is right here. This used to be Highway 80, and it's been renamed to Highway 79. There's still signs marking it as historic Highway 80, and we're at the Tom Mix Monument. This is a monument dedicated to Tom Mix, who was involved in a fatal car crash near here. The monument's right here. The car crash actually happened a little bit south from here, down Highway 80, and we will actually go to the actual death site in just a few minutes. But let's take a look at the monument and talk about Tom Mix a little bit. Here's the actual monument to Tom Mix. He was one of the biggest movie stars of the early 20th century. Huge Western star in silent films. He was in 291 films. Unfortunately, only about 10% of them are available now. A lot of them were lost. But he has a star on the Walk of Fame. His prints are at Grauman's Chinese Theater, along with his horse Tony. And he was a pallbearer at Wyatt Earp's funeral as well. So I mentioned that he died near this site. So on October 12, 1940, Tom Mix was driving up Highway 80 towards Florence, Arizona. There was a bridge that was out, and he ended up crashing into a wash. Now, he probably would have survived the crash, and the reason that I suspect he would have survived the crash is the car that he was driving is still being driven today. Somebody bought it, restored it, and it's still being driven around. It's at shows. But he had a aluminum Halliburton trunk in the back of his car. When he went into the wash, the trunk went flying forward, hit him in the back of the head, and killed him pretty much instantly. And as you can see, the monument here, it says, kind of oddly, in memory of Tom Mix, whose spirit left his body on this spot, and whose characterization of betrayals in life served to better fix memories of the Old West in the minds of living men. And as I mentioned, it wasn't actually on this spot. It was a little bit south of here, in a wash that he crashed, but we'll go take a look at that as well. Along with the monument, there's a lone horse without a rider with his head down. Looks like the horse has been shot a few times with bullets. And then at the rest area here, we have a photo of Tom, some newspaper articles about his passing, and somebody left a photograph of him on a motorcycle. It's actually a pretty nice rest area here. There's picnic tables and some barbecue pits. And we'll go and take a look at the old Highway 80. And so here's old Highway 80. And right down there where that green sign is where the wash that he crashed. While he isn't a household name today, Tom Mix was one of the biggest movie stars of the early 20th century and the biggest Western star of the silent film era. In addition to film, he also had his own radio show and was the star of his own comic book that continued for 13 years after his death. So here we are at the wash where Tom Mix lost his life, which is now named after him. And here we are on Highway 79, which was then Highway 80, looking north towards the wash where he lost his life. Mix had stopped to call his agent at Oracle Junction, which is a little bit south of here, and then continued on his way towards Phoenix. Where we are now, Mix came upon construction barriers because the bridge at this wash had been washed away by a flash flood. He was unable to stop in time, his car swerved twice, and then overturned in the wash. As mentioned earlier, his large aluminum suitcase, which contained money, traveler's checks, and jewels, it was situated on a shelf behind him. In the crash, it hurtled forward, struck him, and broke his neck. After Tom Mix's death, there was actually a little bit of controversy. He had claimed that he was born in Texas, had fought in the Spanish-American War, the Boxer Rebellion, was a sheriff in Kansas, a U.S. Marshal in Oklahoma, and a Texas Ranger. None of that was actually true. He was actually born in Driftwood, Pennsylvania, deserted the Army in 1902, never serving overseas, and was a drum major in the Oklahoma Territorial Cavalry Band when he went off to Hollywood in 1909. It was after his death that the general public learned of his true military history. Right now we're looking back towards the south where Mix would have entered the wash. And of course, with 80 years having passed, there were no remnants of the accident, though I did find these two crosses in the wash. On the lower cross, you can make out a very faint Tom Mix. I'm not sure when these crosses were placed here, but from the looks of them, they've been there for quite some time. As for the upper cross, it clearly said something at some point, however it is definitely not readable today. And this is a look back at the Tom Mix wash from where the crosses are located at. So that's our look at the crash site where Tom Mix was killed and the monument to him. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.